To all those out there who live in areas near wide stretches of empty land like I do, I'm sure you've already been warned why it's dangerous to travel rural roads at night. Growing up in Seattle, one of the biggest cities on the West Coast, I never really needed to worry about the dangers of driving through the middle of nowhere until I committed to a college in eastern Washington. To those who have never been here, the eastern side of Washington is so different from the western side that some may think they accidentally took a wrong turn into another state. Primarily used as farmland, eastern Washington is almost completely absent of all the elements that give the other side its famous reputation as the Pacific Northwest: plentiful forests, constant rain, bodies of water. Instead, this side is mostly just rolling fields of wheat and dried grass that stretch into the distance with a few tumbleweeds and windmills here and there. Driving through this area when the sun's still up can actually be quite pleasant on a nice day. The big sky above and nothing but miles and miles of golden hills on each side of you. Unfortunately, driving through eastern Washington at night is actually one of the most nerve-wracking experiences I will ever have, and here's why. If you've ever had to drive a country road at night, I'm sure you've already been lectured by everybody and their mothers on the obvious dangers like drunk drivers falling asleep at the wheel and animals suddenly running across the road. In my particular area, we have a lot of issues with head-on collisions due to antsy students passing cars recklessly in an effort to get home faster. In addition to these more sensible hazards to be aware of, there's also the famed superstitions like the ghost murderous hitchhikers that wait on the side of the road at odd hours of the night begging for a ride. To top it off, probably the most dangerous part of traveling these rural roads to keep in mind after sundown is the fact that there is no cell service throughout a massive part of the area. So basically, if anything happens to you out here, you're fucked because you'll have no way of contacting anybody for help. Or there's no civilization around for who knows how many miles, and the chances of another car coming by any time soon is pretty slim. With these dangers in mind, it's safe to say that the story I have for you is about an occurrence that I hope never needs to be warned of again. Now, let me begin by saying, the creepiest thing about driving through these empty farmlands at night is by far the lack of light. With no need for any streetlights in the middle of nowhere, and no towns or cities anywhere nearby for the majority of the trip, the only light besides those your headlights provide is that of the stars and moon above. It's a surreal experience looking out your window and seeing only darkness beyond the railing on the side of the road, mostly because you have no idea of what could be out there. And that's precisely why you should be the most scared of driving country roads at night. One day, my boyfriend and I were driving home from my cabin in eastern Washington when I noticed a car pulled over on the side of the road. When we passed the car, I noticed it was completely empty and wondered where the people inside could have gone, considering there was nothing even remotely in walking distance from where we were. I figured they had run out of gas and hitched a ride to the nearest town. But my theory of where they had gone prompted my boyfriend to tell me a story that I will never forget. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Washington State had a bit of a cult problem. This wasn't the first I was hearing of this, considering the fact that one of the church camps I went to when I was younger was, oddly enough, built on the grounds of a disbanded satanic cult. LOL, who made that decision? Anyways, most of these cults resided over on the east side because of how far away it was from literally everything and everybody, and they wanted to isolate themselves. These cults could basically do whatever they wanted and fly completely under the radar due to the fact that there was nobody around to stop them, because a lot of the time nobody even knew they were out there, and that's why they were able to get away with what they did. One summer morning, a police station in one of the few tiny towns amongst the farmland received a call reporting a missing person. The caller claimed their husband had not returned from his shift at the paper mill the night before, and she was worried he had gotten into an accident because he hadn't answered her phone calls. Many of the residents in these small towns commuted to jobs way out in the country land, because many of them were either farmers or workers at the local paper mill, so accidents at night were not uncommon. The station agreed to send out a patrol car to look for him along his route to the mill. At one point along the road, the officer noticed that one of the speed limit signs had disappeared, and noted that it may have been the cause of the missing person, his presumed accident. Local kids must have been bored. But what else did they have to do out here? The man's car was found pulled off to the side of the road about halfway through his commute without a single scratch on it. He was nowhere to be found, but his car was unlocked and his wallet and cell phone lay in plain view on the passenger seat. Something definitely did not seem right. After weeks of investigation, the man was still missing, and nobody had any idea where he had gone. For several days, the police station anxiously awaited any news that could solve the mystery behind the disappearance of the man, but because of the usually uneventful nature of the area, the only report called in was that of another missing speed limit sign. Stupid kids. A few days later, the phone rang once more. There was another missing persons report, almost identical to the one before. Somebody hadn't returned home from their shift the night before. The police sent out a patrol car once again, and sure enough, there it was. An untouched abandoned car on the side of the road with the missing person's belongings clearly left behind. But this time, there was something different. Faint scratch marks could be seen on the driver's seat that trailed onto the floor and out the door. Had somebody been dragged out of their car? This realization of possible assault or abduction raised great alarm, and the announcement was made to all local residents to lock their doors on their commutes home at night and be extremely cautious of anybody who may try and approach their car. One night around 2 a.m., the station received a call that would answer their disturbing question of where these people disappeared to. A couple had been traveling the road where the people had gone missing that night and had just narrowly escaped the fate of those before them. They had fortunately heard the announcement a week before and made sure their doors were locked and kept an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. Apparently, a few minutes after they had entered an area void of any cell service, they noticed a single ray of light that appeared to be floating directly in the middle of the road, just a ways down the route. Confused as to what this could be, the couple slowed down cautiously. As they neared the source of the light, they saw something that probably gives them nightmares to this day. Standing in the middle of the road was a chain of people, linked together, arm in arm, creating a barrier in the street. The man in the middle held a flashlight in his teeth. The car came to a complete halt. There was no way to go forward. Then, in what seemed like a split second after they had stopped the car out of the complete and utter darkness on each side of the road, two people leaped over the railing and ran towards the car and tried to rip the doors open. The human chain had been a distraction. Thankfully, the doors were locked this time, and the husband frantically switched into reverse and slammed on the gas pedal. They got away and had immediately called the station once they regained service. When the police asked if they'd seen where they'd gone as they drove away, they simply answered with "back into the darkness beyond the road." An investigation occurred, but the people in the road were never found. To this day, nobody knows who these people were or where they came from. They eventually did find the bodies of the missing people, though. Both victims were found bound to what looked like the stolen speed limit posts and severely burned. What could be the reasoning behind ripping people from their cars at odd hours of the night and burning them alive out in the middle of nowhere? Without explanation, the police chalked it up to cult activity. But how could it be possible that there was no trace of these people anywhere? It is almost as if they vanished into thin air. What's almost more disturbing is the fact that for all we know, they could still be out there. We just don't know. All I can tell you is to think twice. Next time you're driving a country road at night and mindlessly staring into that deep darkness just beyond the railing, you never know who could be staring back. Growing up, I knew that something was off about my childhood town. For one, there was a list of unwritten but mutually understood rules that we had to observe. These rules, in all honesty, were pretty much just cultural taboos passed down from the older generation. Things like not leaving the rice bucket empty, as it is a sign of being poor, and avoid shaking one's legs when sitting down, as it symbolizes shaking off good fortune, to name a few. Some of the rules were definitely a little on the creepy side, though, like never hanging out clothes to dry overnight, because dirty stuff may be attracted to them. But there was one particular rule that had always struck me as odd, I guess. The rule was simple and straightforward. No one is allowed to travel on the road after sundown. It didn't specify which road, but everyone generally took it to mean the twisting, narrow two-lane road that led down the hill to the nearest city 30 miles away. It was the only connection between the town and the city, so during the day it would often become congested. The more experienced drivers, my father being one of them, would rush to the city and back in the final hours before sunset when the road was less crowded. But no matter what, once night fell, no one drove on the road, not even my father, who'd rather sleep uncomfortably in his car overnight than to attempt the return trip home. One time I asked him about the rule out of curiosity. He remained strangely quiet for a while before saying, "There are no street lights along the entire stretch of road, so it is dangerous to drive at night." I could tell from his eyes that he was hiding something else, so I tried pushing the question a little further. "Papa, why don't you just drive with the headlights on?" But my father simply shook his head. "It's too dangerous even with the headlights, Huey. When you become older and learn how to drive, you'll know why the road is so dangerous." I did grow older, but I never bothered learning how to drive, since my older brother already had a driver's license and inherited our family car. Unlike the rest of us, however, he never really cared about the rules since young, and much less the stupid driving ban, as he called it. My father caught him sneaking out of the house to drive late at night on more than one occasion, and it only got worse when he started dating a girl from the city. At some point he just gave up and told my brother, in the sternest tone I had ever heard from my father, not to call home if he gets into any sort of trouble. My brother, of course, was over the moon. He loved to brag about how wonderful and freeing it was to speed along an empty road without a care in the world, and even persuaded me to go together with him a few times. I refused each time, though it would be a lie to say that I wasn't envious of him. But soon my father's warning became a bizarre reality that I am sure none of us would ever forget. It all started when my brother told us that he was going to bring his girlfriend over to our house after she had knocked off work at 7 p.m. My father didn't say anything, but my mother uncharacteristically voiced out her concern. "Son, it's best to let her visit during the day." "Don't worry, Ma, she'll be staying overnight in my room," he said with a nonchalant wave of his hand. "Can is can, but not today." "She won't be free till next weekend, Ma. It's all right, La." It was too obvious what my brother had in mind. I could only admire his tenacity as he hopped into our Toyota and screeched off into the vanishing sunset. Nothing seemed amiss at first, though my father and mother had a small argument in their bedroom that I couldn't catch before going to sleep early. Meanwhile, I was lying awake on my bed, secretly waiting for the sound of my brother's car to return so that I could sneak a glance at his mysterious girlfriend. "There's no way someone with his looks can land a pretty girl," was probably the thought running in my head when my ears caught the unmistakable ring of the telephone. Well, to be exact, my next-door neighbor's phone was the one ringing. Not many people could afford a landline back then, especially outside the major cities. My family hence borrowed my neighbor Ismail's phone whenever we needed to make or receive calls. Soon after the shrill ring stopped, Ismail knocked on our door loudly calling for my father. But despite him being a light sleeper, I couldn't hear the sound of my father getting out of bed to answer the door. I understood then that this was his way of teaching my brother a lesson. Ismail seemingly caught on to it too, because the knocks soon ceased, and I heard him walking away from the door. I hesitated, wondering if it was really okay to leave my brother to his own devices in God knows where, before poking my head out of my bedroom window, which faced the road outside. "Abang, was it from Kwan?" "Oh, you're awake," Ismail exclaimed, though there was a grim look in his eyes. "Yes, his car has broken down somewhere below the hill. I'm going down to see if I can help him out. Are you coming along?" I agreed without a second thought and got into the front passenger seat of his silver Cansil. Once we passed the last row of houses, it was as if the entire world had melted away. All I could see out of the windows was a thick, impenetrable fog of inky black. Ismail seemed unfazed, however. "Abang, you haven't turned on the headlights," I said, panicking when I realized he was driving almost blindly at 60 km/h and increasing. "No good," he replied calmly in Malayu. "The noise is already disturbing enough. The lights will anger them." I didn't dare to ask who exactly were we angering. We raced down the hill for what felt like an eternity in complete darkness, cornering so sharply at each twist and turn that the tiny hatchback seemed to skid on two wheels. It was only until we spotted two flashing amber lights in the distance that Ismail finally put his foot on the brake. "That's our car," I pointed at the Toyota, parked by the roadside with its hazard lights on. "Yes, I see it," Ismail muttered, "but I don't see anyone in the driver's seat." "Huh?" But sure enough, when we neared the stranded Toyota, my brother was nowhere to be found. Instead, a girl sat in the front passenger seat, visibly shaken but otherwise unhurt. She didn't seem to react to our presence when Ismail stopped beside the car and rolled down his window. "You all right?" he shouted. When she didn't make a move, he pressed the horn until she finally turned her head towards us. I couldn't quite tell her facial expression because of how dark it was, but an inexplicable shudder ran down my spine when I felt her gaze on me. "Are you here to help?" She spoke in a bare whisper. "Where is Kwan?" Ismail asked back, his voice becoming sharper all of a sudden. "Where did he go?" Her hand slowly gestured towards the pitch-black road ahead of us. Ismail paused for a moment before turning towards me. "You stay here with the girl. I'll go find Kwan on foot myself." "Well, wait, Abang." By the time I fumbled with my seatbelt and finally unbuckled it, he was long gone. The only saving grace was that he had left the key in the ignition, so I had the engine idling noise and the meager light from the dashboard to accompany me in the dark. Well, there was also the girl, but something about her felt extremely. "Hui, can you see them? There, behind your car." Her whispery voice startled me. I was about to question how in the world did she know my name, but curiosity got the better of me, and I turned my head around to glance at the rear window. At first, I wasn't sure what I was supposed to see, but then the hazard lights from my brother's car flashed, and for a split second, I caught something stretching across the width of the road. What the hell was that? The hazard lights flashed again, and I could now make out the something to be shadowy wisps floating in a single row. My scream froze in my throat as the lights flashed once more, revealing 6 distinct humanoid figures standing shoulder to shoulder, and with every flash, the figures came closer and closer, their ghostly appearances becoming clearer and more defined. I was snapped out of my fright by a loud rap on the window. "Hooey, hurry up and unlock the car door." I blinked, and the figures vanished as though they were never there to begin with. Somehow I managed to find the knob to release the door lock in the dark, and Ismail tossed my brother's limp body into the back seat with a grunt. I let out a gasp. Is he okay?" "He'll live, but they played a pretty bad prank on your brother," he said, settling into the driver's seat and starting the engine. "No choice but to leave your car here. So tell your parents to meet me in the morning. I can drive them down here to get the car back." "Okay." I hesitated before gathering the courage to ask, "Who are you talking about, Abang?" "Ah, right. You haven't been born yet when it happened," he said quietly. "Long time ago, this road formed part of a highway that went all the way to the capital. A lot of vehicles from the north used this road to get there, and because of the many sharp turns, It was easy to lose control if you weren't paying attention. Many accidents happened here as a result. One night, a long-distance bus was traveling on this exact road with 7 passengers, all high school students on a holiday trip to the capital. The driver was new to the road, and while overtaking another vehicle, he noticed that there was a bend ahead. Too late, and could not stop the bus in time. He pointed at the road ahead absent-mindedly, so he jumped out through the driver's door, and the bus with the 7 passengers crashed right down into a ravine. The ravine was too steep and deep to attempt a rescue, so in the end, everyone on the bus was presumed dead. The bus was never recovered, however, and to this day, it's rumored that their bodies are still lying somewhere down there, waiting to be found. That's horrible. I couldn't help but shudder. So just now, those figures must have been— "You saw them?" Ismail mumbled. "How many did you see?" How many?" I said in surprise. 6, I think." Something clicked in my mind then, and I started. "Wait, one's missing." "No," he whispered as he stared at the rear-view mirror. "The girl—" I frantically turned to check on my brother in the back seat, but a hand shot out and stopped my head in place. "Hui?" "No," Ismail said in a low voice. "Don't look." That was the first time I've ever seen true fear in someone else's eyes. Forcing my saliva down my suddenly dry throat, I sunk into my seat and lowered my gaze to the best of my ability. Ismail turned the car around and began the journey back. Yet this time, we were struggling to gain momentum uphill, even in first gear. It felt like the car had become several times heavier than on our way down, and I was more than certain my scrawny and underweight brother wasn't the cause of it. "Abang, what should we do?" I muttered so softly that I thought he wouldn't catch what I was saying. "They won't hurt us," he answered, though his voice was strained. Then he began murmuring something under his breath, some sort of prayer chant, if I were to guess. The car suddenly jerked from side to side at that very moment, as if something heavy was thrashing about in the back seat. It took every fiber in my being not to scream out loud in panic. I swore I heard laughter from behind, before the shaking abruptly stopped. Ismail didn't waste another moment and slammed the pedal to the metal, sending the cancel flying up the road at breakneck speed. If not for his driving experience, I wouldn't doubt for a second that we would have long ended up in a ravine too. It was only when the lights of the town appeared in the distance that we finally slowed down. And when Ismail pulled up next to our house, my father was already waiting by the front door. The 2 men exchanged a knowing look, and after thanking Ismail for his help, my father effortlessly hoisted my brother out of the car and into our living room. It wouldn't be until the next day when my brother finally regained consciousness. Bizarrely, the last thing he remembered was the engine mysteriously dying on the way back home and him exiting the car to open up the hood. He couldn't recall ever calling Ismail to ask for help, and I soon realized there was no way for him to make a call in the first place, since there were no payphones along the road. As for his girlfriend, apparently she had fallen ill and was forced to stay at home, so he didn't manage to meet up with her at all that night. Oddly enough, however, my brother has avoided driving on that particular road since then. It wasn't until recently, when a new highway to the city that completely bypasses the old road was completed, that he suggested going on a night drive together out of the blue. I was so surprised that I agreed without a second thought. It was not until I sat down in the front passenger seat that I suddenly remembered the incident from many years ago, and it occurred to me just how strange my brother's change of heart was. "So, what's up?" I asked him curiously. "What makes you want to drive at night again after so long?" "Oh, I never stopped wanting to go on night drives," he said nonchalantly. "It's just that for the longest time, I keep on having the same nightmare about the old road, and it seriously makes me hate driving on that road to my very core." I laughed. "A nightmare?" "Yeah, it's honestly super weird," he muttered. It's always the same bus going down the same stretch of road, and I always find myself in the driver's seat no matter what I do. My smile faded. After overtaking a car in front, I must jump out to save myself, or else I'll die in a deep ravine. Man, the screams at the end are the worst, I swear. They never fail to wake me up in cold sweat. I take late-night drives. The things I've seen are unnatural. I've always suffered with insomnia. Even from a young age like 9 or 12, it's always plagued me. I usually just stay up doing meditative things until I fall asleep. That's before I got my car and driver's license. Now I just take long drives to the rural parts of my county where the woods and farmland are. No one is ever out on the road, so it's very peaceful. With that being said, it doesn't mean I'm alone on those dirt roads. The things I've seen have both horrified and intrigued me. I'll share a few experiences I have had on these stretches of lonely road. The figure. During one of my late-night drives, I went further than I usually do. The road gets older and more overgrown in those parts. It basically leads to a very ancient forest with nothing but tire marks as a road. I'm driving, and all of a sudden I catch something in my headlights. A tall humanoid figure covered up by the bushes, facing a tree with its arms by its side, Blair Witch style. I've seen stuff like this before, so I just take a mental note of it and continue on exploring. For context, the things you encounter out here at night aren't necessarily hostile. They won't mess with you if you don't mess with them. I didn't see that particular figure for the rest of the night, and I didn't get a good look at them because of the bushes covering them. All I knew at the time is that they were tall as shit. I'm talking making basketball players look scrawny. Other than its freakish height, the proportions were all out of whack. One shoulder was huge and beefy, but had a twig-like arm attached to it, and the other shoulder was thin, but had a bodybuilder arm at the end of it. That night was pretty uneventful, so I decided to head back early and try to sleep. The next night was much more interesting. As per usual, I couldn't sleep, so I hopped on my car and drove to the rural dirt roads. I decided to head back into those deep woods to see if I could see that weird tall figure again. I'm driving slowly down this forest for 30 minutes, radio off, dead silent woods, and I don't see a thing, which is pretty uncommon not to see something weird. I closed my eyes and sighed, running my fingers through my hair. When I opened them, the figure was there. Misshapen body, arms at its sides, facing the opposite direction. It was directly in front of my headlights, and I got a better look at it. This thing was wearing a filthy, dark green trench coat with some torn brown jeans and boots splattered with mud. The figure's legs were also misshapen and uneven. One leg was swollen and was as thick as a car tire, while the other leg was literally just skin and bones. The hair on the back of its head wax patchy and looked like a failed buzz cut. It stretched out its skinny arm, like it was getting ready to point at something to the side. The figure's hands made finger scissors that opened and closed. I sat there completely in shock. My heart sank with the realization it was mocking me. A while back in school, I got bullied by this asshole who called me Snip Snip and would constantly make the same scissoring motion with his fingers. He called me this because, well, I'm a trans girl. I grunted in anger and gestured for this thing to move to the side. Its back was facing me, so it didn't see. I had serious thoughts of running this thing over, but I remembered. If I don't mess with them, they won't harm me. I just drove around it and didn't dare look in the rearview mirror to see its face. It was facing backwards for a reason. I still see it from time to time, and it always is mocking me with gestures, mimicking something painful from my past. Sign language to mock my sibling who went deaf from an infection, waving a fist around violently to reference my physical ex, the gesture of holding a cigarette, to make fun of my aunt who died of lung cancer, etc. This thing really just pisses me off more than anything. Its mutated-ass body is kind of unnerving, though. The Eater? The Eater is a pretty common one to see on those roads at night. My first encounter with it was just like all the other times I see this thing. It's semi-humanoid with pitch-black skin and a very obese frame. It walks on all fours like a gorilla. It has tiny claws for hands. Its face is like a leech with dead, glazed-over eyes on the sides of its neck, and the gross thing has a long tongue. I'll see it early on in my drives. The eater is usually crouched over a corpse of a dead animal with a chunk of the carcass's meat in its tiny hands. The eater just licks the meat with that huge tongue. It just laps up gore and blood. I don't think it hunts. It's more of a scavenger. The eater is very docile and gets kind of curious when I pass by. It doesn't get too close, though. Sometimes I'll throw some leftover dinner I have into the tall grasses for it. I still wouldn't touch it if you fucking paid me. Live and let live is what I've learned in these places. Skinless. Skinless is one of the more dangerous things out in those woods. Whenever I see her, I immediately turn around and go straight home. She's a skinless woman, hence the name, in a white dress soaked in blood. Her flayed body is always bleeding, and she has a large butcher's knife clenched in her hand. She appears in the tall grass and will stumble towards your car slowly. She's slow, but she will catch up eventually. Skinless will stand by your driver's side window and tap her knife against the glass. She'll ask you if she's beautiful in a voice that echoes through your soul. It sounds like a much more demonic voice is speaking under hers. If you lock eyes with Skinless, you'll have the uncontrollable urge to gag or throw up. If you do throw up or gag, she'll violently smash your window and try to flay your skin off. I've only had this happen once, and I managed to speed off before she could shatter the window. She kept screaming about how she will skin me alive. If you do basically anything, she'll kill you. I haven't really bothered to try saying yes because it's nearly impossible with the crippling fear and that sick feeling you get in your stomach. Your best option is to just drive away before she catches up. Once you get out of those grasses and to civilization, you're pretty much fine. I may write about my first encounter with Skinless in a separate post. If you see her in the distance, just turn around and don't look back. Headlights. This is by far the most dangerous creature I've encountered on my drives. If you see this thing, you better go as fast as you can in the other direction and pray to every single goddamn deity you know. I almost stopped going on drives after I met this thing. Last month, I was on a drive that was eerily calm. There was nothing, no wind, no rustling, not even any strange apparitions. I thought it was strange and slowed down slightly while driving, my eyes darting to every corner of the tall grass and the forest. There was absolutely nothing. Skinless usually scares off some other entities and animals, but she only appears once every couple of weeks. This was different. This continued until I reached an old farm at the edge of the tall grass. I usually pull to a crawl and look at the barn. Sometimes there are shadows or a strange, ram-like creature that walks by the windows. Nothing walked by the windows. Strangely, the absence of any horrible monster was making me afraid. That's when I saw it. Two huge headlights stabbing my eyes like two suns. I heard the rumbling sputter of a damaged engine. In front of me was a 1940s-style truck painted completely black. A sense of impending death fell over me like a macabre blanket, and I quickly fumbled with the stick shift to put my car in reverse. I nearly floored it as a scream erupted from inside the truck. The scream was not of this world. It ripped all the joy I had in my heart out and into the starless night. Whatever was driving that thing was pure evil. It was an ancient force of malice, like the boogeyman or the devil. The truck engine growled, and it peeled after me while I was in reverse. I didn't have time to turn around, or else it would cut me off and crash into me. Eventually, I reached a clearing where I could turn around by putting all my weight into turning the steering wheel. I zoomed down the forgotten stretches of road with the truck in hot pursuit. My radio came to life with a piercing roar of static. It played an audio that still haunts me to this day. A woman was screaming in pure fear, a deep, primal howl of pure dread. In the background of her screams was that old "Here Comes the boogeyman song. A masculine voice could also be heard mumbling as there was a slicing sound, and the woman S screams somehow got louder. I peered into the rear view again to see another horrible thing. Two huge pale arms that were 6 feet long coming out from beneath the black truck. The hands balled into fists and tried to slam in my rear window, but I quickly swerved, almost hitting a tree. These pale arms coming from the truck galloped along the ground, helping it gain speed. I soared out of the old roads and pulled onto a modern street and slammed the brakes at a gas station. As I caught my breath and refueled from that horrifying experience, I noticed my radio was spewing a choppy static that sounded like a dying moan. Yeah, I haven't been out driving for a while after. I'm thinking I'm going to start taking a different route. If you do find yourself there, remember to chuck some meat in the field, look out for skinless, and don't even think about heading to that barn.